Greetings, everyone. My name is Caleb, and together with my partners Armin and Zach, we will teach you all the basics you need to know about terrain generation in Unity. Using some basic rock and tree models, we will go over how to convert these objects into usable features of a 3D terrain, as well as learn how to create the terrain itself. But ultimately, the goal of this presentation is to help you begin your journey of becoming a proficient terrain creator in Unity. As for safety concerns, while your personal safety certainly won't be in any danger, the same cannot be said about your data. The key here is to save often to ensure that none of your hard work goes to waste. The F5 key is a quick and convenient shortcut to save your data so that you don't lose it. This guide will be run on a PC with Windows 10, 32GB of RAM, an Intel i7 processor, and an NVIDIA GTX 1080 graphics card. We will be using the 2020.3.2 version of Unity for this tutorial, which is a long-term support version, making it more stable. The features used in this tutorial haven't been changed in a while, however, so it shouldn't be an issue if your Unity is a different version. If any features we use are missing, then updating Unity to the 2020.3.2 version should fix that issue. We will be using two assets that we made prior to this tutorial, both a tree and a basic rock. These are simple assets that are just being used for demonstration purposes. You may either make your own assets or find some simple objects on the internet to use. The shapes of neither the tree nor the rock will matter for this procedure.
To get started with creating a new terrain in Unity, first go to the Game Object menu up in the top left of the screen. From there, go down to 3D Object and select Terrain. From there, a new terrain will be added to the scene and you can begin editing it. So, to make some changes to the terrain, first we're going to go to the Settings window here. From here, you can edit attributes about the terrain such as its material, its height, width, length, and other size and resolution properties. So for this demonstration, we're going to change the width and length of the terrain to be 256 by 256, and we're going to shorten the height down to 128 to make it a little bit more manageable for this presentation.
With our new terrain ready to go, we'll begin by sculpting. So ensure that the paintbrush icon is selected in the Terrain Inspector window to the right, and that the Raise or Lower Terrain drop-down menu option is also selected. You can begin sculpting hills or mountains by pressing and holding left-click over your terrain. The amount of time you hold down left-click for over your terrain determines how much that terrain will be impacted. Holding left-click down for less than a second is more likely to yield a hill, whereas holding left-click down for a few seconds is more likely to create a substantial impact on the terrain, resembling mountains. Alternatively, you can press and hold the Shift key and left-click over your terrain to lower it. This allows you to lower any previously sculpted terrain.
Additionally, a custom brush can be chosen from the palette over here to provide a more natural look for your landscape. Here we're using a rougher shaped brush that will provide more natural hilly features to the landscape compared to the default circle brush. You can use this brush the same way as you use the other one to raise and lower the terrain, and you can make whatever tweaks needed to get that added realism for your environment. Additionally, you can also use more abstract shaped stamps, such as this star stamp here, to create custom shapes in your terrain. You have the option of creating new brushes as well, so any new icon that you want to use as a brush shape, you can add in from there.
We'll now select the Smooth Height drop-down menu option in the Terrain Inspector window, and select a different brush as well, so as to make the most out of the Smooth Height Unity Terrain feature. Here, we're holding down left-click over the terrain so that any previously sculpted part of the terrain is smoothed out in such a way that the sharp edges are flattened. Additionally, you can edit the brush size slider in the Terrain Inspector window to get a more proper scale at which you'd prefer to smooth your terrain out at, meaning you can opt for a smaller or larger brush at any point while editing your terrain. go ahead and smooth out any areas of your terrain that look too sharp, such as major peaks or hills.
We can also switch to the Set Height menu option. This will allow us to set the terrain to a very specific height and flatten it to match that height. So here we can edit the height value. Currently it's set to 0. This will flatten the terrain back down to its default. If we go and change this to a value of 16, you can see that when we paint over the terrain, it raises it to a height value of 16 and flattens the existing features. We can go back over this again and increase the height to 32 and create a nice terraced look. You can see the smooth fall off from the brush makes it so that these height changes are gradual as opposed to extremely sharp. This is a great way of creating smooth hills and even flattening out mountaintops to be able to create plateaus. If you need to place buildings in your scene or anything else that requires a flat surface, this is the ideal way to adjust your terrain. Additionally, you can flatten the entire terrain to a set value by using this Flatten All feature right here. This will set the entire landscape to the height specified here. Here we flatten the entire height to 32, but we'll bring it back down to 0 to get us back to the default height map that we started with.
Now, switch to the Paint Holes drop-down option from the Terrain Inspector window. By holding left-click over your terrain with this feature selected, you can freely delete the surface of the terrain specified by your brush at the mouse cursor. As you see now, you can also hold Shift and left-click at the same time to recreate any holes that you've made.
From here, we've already added in some tree models for the sake of this demonstration, but we're going to show you how to add trees to the landscape. So start by going to this tree tab here, and select the tree that you want to use, and just like when you sculpt on the terrain, you can paint the tree onto the landscape and fill in the space with instances of that object. Here you can see our tree model being scattered over the environment, making it look like a forest. And we'll just fill that in right there, and we can go ahead and erase the trees the same way that we can lower the terrain in sculpt mode by using Shift and left click. From here, we can also add foliage to the environment. In this case, we're using these green spheres to represent rocks or grass. We've already added the sphere to the demo, but here you can see a similar scattering effect. This window would be used in cases where you want to just instance simpler models such as grass that don't take up the entire landscape.
There are a few common problems you may encounter while following the terrain creation process. The two possible errors encountered above are the most common when going through the process. Both errors can be solved with a simple Ctrl-Z command, which will undo nearly any accidental missteps. Another common error is changing the view of Unity. This can be fixed by simply clicking Window, then Layout, then Default. This will return Unity to the default view. If you are having any additional issues, please visit the official Unity documentation. It will be able to answer any unanswered questions and perhaps even be able to expand your knowledge further. Located here is a list of all of our sources for the images used throughout the presentation. And right here is a link to the finished product, which may be helpful to view and check if you've done anything differently. And with that, we'd like to thank you for your time and best of luck in your future Unity terrain generation endeavors.